Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness. Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. I'm wearing a tie. I must be the host. I'm Jeff Kellam, the Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott. It's Palm Sunday, and we're going to be talking about what the meaning of Palm Sunday is, but also moving us through this Holy Week yet to come. Many years ago, a person in my congregation said, every week is holy. And I said, yes. And he said, maybe we should call this the Holier Week or the Holiest Week. Whatever we call it, it is a time of an emotional roller coaster and a theological roller coaster as well, as we move from the joy of this day through the pain of the coming week and then Resurrection Day. My two guests today are not wearing ties, so they didn't get to host. Deliberate.
Yeah, exactly.
And so their voices are going to be very familiar, and their faces too. Mark Kimpland, who's the pastor at the Endwell United Methodist Church, the senior pastor, and Joseph Sellepack, who is the executive director of the Broome County Council of Churches, both co-hosts. And we've gotten together to talk about the meaning of this week and the way churches will experience worship as well as their own personal devotions during the week and their thoughts about the meaning of this part of Jesus' life and death and resurrection. So I know, Mark, let's start with you. You're the active pastor among us.
Yes.
I'm retired. Joe is an executive at a council of churches and is not leading worship day by or week by week. What kind of a week is this for you?
It's one like no other week because of the demands that are put on pastors that choose to do Holy Week services. Many do not, and I've run up against some tension with that in my ministry over the years. Why do we do that? And there may or may not be a lot of people present. And my rebuttal to that is, if you do not have, let's say, Holy Thursday, Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday services, I'll guarantee no one shows up. But if you at least offer them, It's an opportunity for people to go deeper. Because one of the things that I find that's kind of been a mainstay in my ministry is that on Palm Sunday, we don't travel Holy Week yet. We're not there yet, folks. The donkey's moving slow, okay? The entrance into Jerusalem. But one of the things that we do to prepare for that, at least historically in the churches that I've served, is that the end of the Palm Sunday service begins that trek. And the mood begins to soften and deepen. And what we've done over the last many years is that during the singing of the last hymn on Palm Sunday, people take their palms and lay them in the aisle. And it's a really solemn kind of beginning to the Holy Week experience, that they can lay the palm down. The celebration is over. Now the journey begins. And we leave them on the aisle throughout Holy Week. And it's really neat that when people come on Holy Thursday and also Good Friday, that the palms dry up. And you can kind of tactily, hear and see the dried up palm leaves as people make their way into the sanctuary on Thursday and Friday.
Now, the first time you did this, you did tell the janitorial crew to leave them alone, right?
I did, and they were thrilled. So we don't have to clean afterwards. I said, no, go ahead, leave them there.
The reason I say that is I once did a service where I was using the idea of somebody had put a penny out. An author, it may have been Anne Lamott or somebody who has a child, put a penny on the sidewalk, a sharp, shiny penny, just to have people be joyful as they picked it up, as a sign of grace. So I said, well, let's put these shiny pennies around the sanctuary on Sunday morning. So I went to the 8:30 service to begin that service, and the ushers had said, look at what we found, and they had picked them all up.
Oh, no. So much for best laid plans.
Yes, so I'm glad they let the palms stay there.
They did.
That's wonderful because it is tactile and it's visual. Yeah.
Because on Thursday and Friday, typically, it is a somber mood. There's not a whole lot going on with PowerPoint and all of that. And so as people come in, you can hear the crunch, for lack of a better theological word.
Yes.
But it reminds them of where they've come from
Right.
and where they're headed.
Yeah. Palm Sunday for you, Joe.
So along with Mark, the churches that I've served, we've pretty much done the Palm Sunday
The parade.
liturgy and the parade and all of that kind of stuff, just because you want to make sure that if you're going to celebrate Maundy Thursday and Holy and Good Friday, that you have that set apart. I have been involved in services where they've done that Passion, the Passion one, where they do the readings from like a reader theater all the way through, and it kind of substitutes itself for Holy Week. So you have Passion Sunday rather than Palm Sunday. Yes. And I always left feeling a little bit hollow through that, because it kind of is it's like going to Walmart. It's the shopping experience of the entire week. You condense it. You don't do any part of the week with much justice.
Yeah.
You just give the overview. It's kind of like what do they call that when they give you the abridged version of the book instead of actually getting the full thing, right?
Yeah.
So I like having the full thing, and I like also when you have certain traditions like the one Mark was talking about. We used to put balloons out and other kinds of stuff too, to kind of make it more celebratory. Kids loved it. It was like one of those kinds of things. But then at the end, you remind them that the palms that you're celebrating with will become next year's ashes. Mm-hmm. So it's like reminding me again, of the connection between the cross and the joy of Palm Sunday. It's not like it's a parade like no other, which is something that you have to remind people that it's just not this is not the first parade for Easter. This is a rather difficult event in the life of Jesus.
Yes.
And what's interesting, and I've thought about this, in John's Gospel, you don't really get that same sense, because Jesus goes to Jerusalem 3 times through the course of that, and in Mark and Luke and Matthew, it's toward the end where you have all of this stuff happening, and I think that we've borrowed most of that from the synoptics, and I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because this should be the common story that we celebrate. Yeah. We need to connect somehow the work of Jesus on the cross with the celebration of that kind of goes on with that.
Yeah, doing that all at the same time, I agree. It just is, you talk about going from 0 to 80 in a car and such things. Yeah. It's almost like going from 80 to 0.
Oh, exactly.
And I've never seen that really done effectively. When you might start with glory, laud, and honor, or Hosanna, loud Hosanna, and then you end with were you there? Wow.
Yeah. I confess to having done that, Palm Passion Sunday, with the realization, as you mentioned, Mark, that some folks don't come on Maundy Thursday. They don't come on Good Friday. Yeah. And so they're going from victory to victory. Yeah. They're going from celebration to celebration, and there's no recognition that there was that powerful drama.
And it's always going to be a bit of a crapshoot on that, right?
Yes.
So you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
And the choices that I always made, I had shared with you, like I interned at in Episcopalian churches, even though I was a low church person. Yeah. Wesleyans don't get much lower than that generally. But when I was at the Episcopal Church, we followed the whole, the drama of the entire week with even on Wednesday. You start with the Stations of the Cross, and you go through that on Wednesday, and then Thursday you go through, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and then the Easter Vigil on Saturday night, leading to Sunday morning, and then you have the Easter service. If you follow that whole not only are you in church a lot, but you follow the story pretty closely.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, and I think for the culture in which we live, it is a story that many people will be encountering maybe freshly for the first time. They remember the story as children, but now if they've come back to church, come back to a church they find safe and inspiring and helpful, they're going to go through this story and find the drama that we sometimes, goodness, you preach the lectionary over and over and over, and for pastors who've been in the pulpit for many years, how am I going to do this differently this year?
Yeah.
And do you need to do it differently? So for the pastor, it may feel like it's old news.
Yeah.
But for the congregation, like you're suggesting, especially the younger people who are coming through, it's still fresh to them.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that's one of the struggles that I have. Now that I've been in ministry for 30 years, is the idea that for everyone else it's not, but that for me it's an internal struggle.
Yeah.
It's my struggle, and I don't want to play that out for somebody else.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about Palm Sunday, and we've moved toward the rest of the week as well. One of the things that you mentioned was the Stations of the Cross. And when I was the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Trumansburg, it was the Catholic Church that invited the community to the Stations of the Cross on Friday for a service. And I found it, because it was, we were reading Scripture, we were reading the liturgy, we were standing and moving throughout the church, and there was time for silence, and I thought it was very moving. Plus, I just loved the idea that we're not just Presbyterians around here, we're not just Methodists or Wesleyans or Episcopalians, we have this story in common. I mean, you may not be in a liturgical church that pays much attention to Lent even, but man, when you get to Palm Sunday, you get to Easter Sunday, you can't overlook those.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
What about Maundy Thursday?
I appreciate Joe sharing that tension, and it is a human tension, I believe, with a pastor, to be creative and innovative, and being on that cutting edge, and oh boy, I wonder where the pastor's going this time.
How can I use the banjo?
Where's my kazoo? For the most part, the parishioners aren't thinking that way.
No, they're not.
We do.
Yeah,
right.
And it's a really creative tension that's good and bad, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And so, and the more, the more I'm around and doing all of this, I guess I'll share, like with Maundy Thursday.
And what does Maundy mean? Because not everybody knows what that means.
Yeah, it's the idea. Well, as a matter of fact, we don't even call it Maundy Thursday. That's a historical thing that I've tried not to use, and forgive me, because I like calling it Holy Thursday.
Right.
It's just Holy Thursday for us. Yeah. But I really have, rather than being innovative, we tried this, I think, last year for the first time, and it was amazing. Just to simply have the congregation meet for a meal. As the story unfolds.
Yeah.
And then at that meal, we'll sing, we'll pray, and we'll break and share the bread and share the cup of Holy Communion. And we do it outside of the sanctuary, because chances are the Last Supper didn't happen in a sanctuary.
Right, it wasn't at the temple.
So, and the feedback I got on that it was, you were talking about low church, and it was just really, really neat. And I really believe that's going to be a tradition, because prior to that, it was the idea of what can I do new, and how can I, between foot washings and hand washings, and, you had that whole story in there also, and such things on Holy Thursday. But to experience all of that in one way or another, I think has been a blessing.
Yeah.
Because there's so many ways that you can go with that. But the idea of just sharing a meal together as people of faith, and then sharing in Holy Communion and keeping it simple, is kind of where we are right now.
Other traditions do the extinguishing of candles.
Yes.
The stripping of the sanctuary.
The tenebrae kind of
Tenebrae,
thing.
and darkening, and moving then into the eve, seeing this is Crucifixion Eve. Joe, what about?
So Maundy Thursday really comes from the Latin about mandatum, which is the command of Jesus to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the command, and it's the symbol for it, of course, is the foot washing. Mm-hmm. And so, along with Mark, when I've served churches, we've done a simple meal on Maundy Thursday, and then as part of it, we've done foot washing, which is not something that you actually, you don't think about it, but it's something that Jesus did, and you ask them what. It puts a visceral response. Will you wash my feet, as Peter said, in the foot washing? Then wash my entire body. And Jesus basically says, well, you are, by the end of this evening, you're going to be washed all over. It's and not only that, you're gonna have denied me 3 times. It's kind of like. It's one of those things that I think of counterculturally too. How many of us like people touching our feet? There's a vulnerability to it that I don't think that we appreciate.
Oh, it's
too much.
Deeply personal, and you feel very vulnerable, and I mean, it's somewhat embarrassing.
And it's very embarrassing. Sure. And think about how embarrassing it is for the minister who wants to do it.
Yeah, but it was it was a thing.
Yeah.
When people came in to eat, the host would either wash the feet or have a servant wash the feet.
Yeah. And then celebrating communion in the same way is very interesting. It's great too, and I think that's part of the story as well. It kind of links it to the upper room and what's going on within the drama around Jesus and that during that week. Yeah. Anyway.
It used to be that Presbyterians had Holy Communion 4 times a year. Didn't want to overdo a good thing, apparently. Wanted to keep it special. Yeah. And then we became liturgically aware and awake and ecumenical, and we started celebrating Holy Communion more often. And now it's one of these first Sunday of the month kind of things, and then the what I call the high holy days. One Palm Sunday occurred on the first Sunday of the month back in Vermont. And then we had communion again on Maundy Thursday, and then we would have communion again on Easter Sunday. A few folks were saying, "Gosh, isn't that too much for 3 times?" And I said, "Well, let's do it so that on Palm Sunday it's Holy Communion, on Maundy Thursday it's the Lord's Supper, much more subdued, simple, quiet, meditative, and then we'll do the Eucharist, the great feast of Thanksgiving, on Easter." So each one had a different personality that I think helped folks in understanding the relationship to the bread, the body, as well as to the cup, the blood. So, gosh, we've got 9 minutes now, and now we're on to Good Friday. I'll share that one of the most impressive Good Friday services I've been to was a drama where a local theater group did the gospel readings and enacted this and had a wooden cross that was carried up the aisle, and we had moved the pulpit out of the way, and there was even some red ink on the hands of the actor. Weeks later, the stain on the carpet was still there. reminding me when I got in the pulpit of the sacrifice that was made so that we have new life.
Yeah.
That was an impressive service for me, and I know that the Good Friday services are often, affective.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done many things on Good Friday, from having a large wooden cross and having people nail their sins to the cross, and the sound of the hammer with nothing in the background, no organ music, nothing, just that sound that echoes through the sanctuary has been very powerful over the years. Also, I back in my days where I was in Fulton, before coming to Endwell, there would always be on Good Friday a crosswalk through the city, which was always very powerful. And it was the Stations of the Cross, and we would stop at certain places and sing a hymn. And for me, that was, yes, the story is powerful, but so was the witness, of just going through the city and such things.
Was it ecumenical?
It was ecumenical. It was at the Fulton Council Churches did
I love
it.
that.
And that was neat. That was a neat experience that we did every Good Friday. But when as a student pastor, I received a cassette tape. This is aging me. Which was cutting edge back then,
Right,
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Google it.
A cassette tape. And someone made it for me. And I'm not much of a movie buff and such things, but it was one of the passion movies of Jesus, and you could hear it, and he's being whipped, and he's, and people and the voices of the crowd and such things. But throughout the whole thing is a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, as he says, "It is finished," the heartbeat stops.
Yeah.
And talk about hearing silence in that moment. Now, I used that many times, as many as I could, because I lent that cassette, short story, I lent that cassette tape to somebody who had a 2-year-old child. And the following Sunday, it came back in a big clop. She goes,
man.
"I'm really sorry, but Johnny had some fun with it and such." Somehow I got my hands on it again, and I've used it before. But that
Do you know where it came from?
Some gentleman just put it together, just kind of mixed it all together. It was probably totally illegal, copyright-wise, and such things back then. Yeah. But I had used that for years, and it was just something people really look forward to hear, to feel the final life in that moment of Jesus.
The heartbeat certainly.
That was that was amazing.
Because the sound that you're describing sounds so much like the end of Jesus Christ Superstar, the original recording, where you're hearing the voices and then the pounding of the nails. And that's a hard thing to take. I think of the Good Friday services where, once again, we are enacting all of these different characters in the story. I know John Wayne as the Roman guard under the cross in some of these films. This sounds kind of silly. Surely this was the Son of God. But beyond these motion pictures, the scriptures paint a wonderfully complex story of these characters, Mary and Peter, and gosh, it's wonderful that it leads us then into Saturday, and this is a day that's often seen as, we don't even have a name for it really. I mean, I guess people call it Holy Saturday. It's kind of the day between the days. Have you done anything with this liturgically in a church?
I have not, and it's kind of written in the Good Friday liturgy that Saturday is a time of preparation for Sunday. A time of rest, a time of discernment, a time of prayer and such. So I've been, I don't know how intentional I've been about it, but that's been my intentionality, to have that as a time of just preparing for the celebration that is to come. But I've never done anything service-wise, liturgically, within the sanctuary or anything like that before.
One of my favorite sermons of all time was a sermon that Tony Campolo gave. It's called, the entire sermon is called "It's Friday, but Sunday's Coming." And it was, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. He just goes through the entire sermon, and he breaks it all down into these kinds of things. But in the sermon, we find that we're living in Saturday. Saturday is the time in between. It's you don't have, you have the death, but you don't have the hope of resurrection.
Right.
You're kind of caught there. You're staying there. And I think that when you celebrate the full week and you get into Saturday, it should be silent.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for that. And I think it is because that dramatizes where we are, where we live our lives. Most of us have experienced pain in our life. I'm old enough now where death has started to enter into my story even more than it did when I was, a young adult and all the rest of it. And we need to be reminded that most of our congregation lives in Saturday, between the experience and where, and we, even though on Sunday we'll get up and we'll talk about the resurrection, we'll celebrate it in bright colors and in flowers and all the rest of it. The majority of us live our lives caught in a time of silence.
Yeah, good point.
About 2 minutes left, so let me just kind of preview next Sunday's program, which will be about Easter. Mark, you'll be talking with our former co-host, Alicia Dixon Gerard.
Yes.
And you'll be talking about Easter Sunday.
Yeah, we'll be sharing some thoughts, some reflections, some maybe memories, and theology of Easter, and how it might be different among different faiths and religions, and the idea of denominations and such. And I look forward to that.
Good, I do too.
Yeah, just to kind of...
Because I always watch.
Yeah.
I love watching myself. Our guests today have been Reverend Mark Kimpland, who is the senior pastor at the Endwell United Methodist Church, and Joe Sellepack, who is the executive director of the Broome County Council of Churches. And we've been talking about today, Palm Sunday, and then the week to come, and then again, as we talked about, next Sunday is Easter Sunday and the great celebration of the resurrection. I encourage you during the coming week, if you've not been to worship or to church in a long time, experience the week. Go today to a Palm Sunday service. And then if you've not been to a Maundy Thursday service, you'll find one. Google it locally and see what it's like to gather with folks in this very special week within the Christian calendar. Thank you for joining us for this Encounter program. I'm Jeff Kellam, the Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott at 202 East Main Street, if you'd like to visit us there. We encourage you then to, in the coming week, be gentle with people and with yourself.